Going into game 8 of the Fischer random match, Magnus Carlsen led Hikaru Nakamura by 2 wins. So there'd been 3 draws, 3 wins for Carlsen, just 1 win for Hikaru Nakamura. So this was the last of their long rapid games, 45 minutes plus 15 minutes for the rest of the moves. So Nakamura desperate to try and catch up before they go into this series of 8, well, blitz games actually. I mean, they call it short rapid games, but it's just 10 minutes on the clock. Anyway, that's for tomorrow. So Nakamura looks like things are slipping away. Game 7 was a bit of a disaster for him. So he's got the black pieces. Now instead of f4 that Nakamura played here, Carlsen went with d4 and f5 from Nakamura. And here I think a very clever move from Carlsen. He just played f4, just locking down the possibility of e5, and also just wanting to play e4, and those pawns will give white a kind of, well, Marozzi bind in the centre, and that is pretty good. So probably objectively the best move here is to play d5, just to gum the position up. But that is not to Nakamura's taste. Carlsen, of course, likes these kind of heavy manoeuvring positions. But Nakamura, desperate to play for a win, lashed out with g5. Can you believe it? So it's a kind of Benko gambit. Well, Carlsen took it. And h6. Now, if that pawn is taken, then I think black has pretty good compensation. You know, you play e5, you know, white's pieces are in a bit of a gum, black's pieces coming out very, very quickly. So Carlsen reacted very coolly here. He played knight out, so he's bringing his pieces into play, very sensible. And if pawn takes pawn here, then just e4, and white, well, has very good control of the centre actually. So Nakamura played d5 to prevent that move e4, but now a brilliant move from Magnus Carlsen. He played g4. Great idea. Obviously threatening to take here, so black really has to take that pawn, which knocks out a pawn from the centre. And now e4. So white is really fighting hard for control of the centre, and it's already difficult for black. So this pawn is threatened. Nakamura takes, and now you could recapture with the queen, you could recapture with the knight, but very good play, very good practical play from Carlsen. He makes sure that he's developing. So Nakamura takes this pawn, and then Carlsen simply castles on the queen side. So just hanging back, recapturing that pawn. Of course, that's going to drop at any time. But you can see that already, well, not only does white control the centre, but he's better developed. His king is castled, and really Nakamura's king looks in big trouble. It can hardly go to the king side. I mean, there are too many pieces in the way, but the position is so open anyway. But even if this rook did manage to swing over here, you can see that black's king position wouldn't be terribly good. So things going Carlsen's way. You could play bishop g2 here, bishop e2 just to recapture the pawn, but Carlsen played more boldly. He played d5, which allows the bishop to come into d4. I think a6 is an indication that things are not going well for black, because you really don't want to waste a move, you know, preventing a knight or bishop coming to b5. Doesn't exactly help with the development. So bishop d4 just played, hitting the rook. And that's an awkward attack to deal with, because actually the rook is not terribly well placed. You can see now knight h6, for what it's worth, is no longer available, and this bishop about to come to this lovely square. So Nakamura fights that, but still, knight takes g5. Rook here, and now white has a very pleasant choice. You could just play h4 actually, because if pawn takes pawn, then bishop h5, pin and win. And if the pawn isn't captured, then well, white is just very solid here. I mean, it's, you know, this is close enough to a normal chess position for us to understand that black's position is just an utter wreck. You can see that straight away. White looks like he's playing normal chess. Black's pieces just look like they've been dropped on the board. No coordination, horrible. But Carlsen decided to play for the initiative. Knight e6, and it's a very strong move. This was taken. And now Carlsen gave up the bishops, but there's a specific reason for this. Well, first of all, if knight takes, once again it's pin and win. Obviously knight takes bishop allows queen takes rook. So coming back here, Nakamura had to recapture with the rook. Queen just slid out of the way. And now black's problem is that of course he needs to bring this rook into the game, but if castle's queenside, then rook takes followed by queen takes rook. So after queen g3, bishop h6 check. Now still a threat to take here. Also wants to play bishop takes g4. Rook e3. Now you could play queen h4 here and gain a tempo on the bishop. Play bishop g4. I think it's very, very strong. I mean, Carlsen realised this as well. He was starting to take his time here, but he's in complete control. So castle's queenside. Finally, Nakamura manages to bring that rook into the game, but Carlsen has a wonderful initiative. He's not even material down here. Yeah, it's even material, but black's piece is still horribly bottled in, and bishop a6. Somehow it's not a surprise that white has some devastating hit here, and really, you know, Nakamura has been completely outplayed in this game. If that is taken, then the queen swings across. Threatening mate, threatening to take here as well. So if rook takes knight, well, you can take here. You can also take on a6 and take on d5. You can also just play queen takes d5 actually, which keeps control. Nakamura realised that was pretty bad, so he found c6. That's actually not a bad way to continue. Now, Carlsen started consuming quite a lot of time here. I think he was looking for a kill basically, and he ended up heading for an end game. He could have played knight b4. So if pawn takes bishop, then knight takes c6, and otherwise, well, the bishop is going to slide back, and white is just a pawn up. But maybe in the end he just thought, well, you know, let's just trade pieces, and you know, I've got a safe pawn advantage or two pawn advantage in the end game. I suspect he was also looking at queen g3, but black can just about get away with that. And if rook e1, it's not quite pin and win this time because bishop g7 holds. So Carlsen went for rook takes rook, and in the end played the endgame. Of course, he's material ahead here, but it's not so simple, and Nakamura played a very good move. I suspect that Carlsen had underestimated that move. Blocking in the bishop, so there's a threat to play king c7. Rook e1. Looking at the e-pawn, and if, for example, rook a7 doesn't trap the bishop, well, it sort of does, but after this, That's the point of rook e1 check, and you take the bishop with a winning endgame. So, but good move from Nakamura. Nakamura had more time, but he was starting to move very, very quickly. Just creating problems. So that keeps tabs on the bishop, so the rook doesn't have time to move back. And now rook g8. So white will be able to save this bishop because it's going to bounce around here. But it's not the best position for that bishop, and Nakamura has counterplay. Nevertheless, at the moment it's a 2-pawn advantage. Opposite colour bishops, but yeah, very awkward position. That's a clever move from Nakamura. He very good at setting problems for his opponent. But little by little, Carlsen is starting to get out of this slight difficulty with his king, gave up this pawn, and well, then he was ready to push these guys. Now we're at move 36, and they reached the time control at move 40. Just wait for it, wait for it. That's move 40, and at this moment the players were given 15 extra minutes. So Carlsen was down to the wire, so he had about 15 minutes left. Nakamura, round about this point, from memory, I think he had something like around about 20, maybe no more than, I think maybe 27 minutes left after the 15 minutes was added. So he had plenty of time. And he continued moving quickly, putting the pressure on Carlsen. Now, Carlsen did very well. I'm going to move forward because this was quite a long game, and this is not easy to make progress. But after 69 moves, they reached rook and bishop against rook. Carlsen with the extra bishop. Now, Nakamura had more time than Carlsen, so I mean, I think he was always odds on to hold this position. But Carlsen just had a few minutes left. He had something like 3 or 4 minutes left, and the time ticked down. Of course, you know, he was trying to win. I'm not going to go through all 119 moves of this game. I'm going to leap to move 119. And you can see that Magnus has made no progress whatsoever. But at this moment, he's down to seconds on the clock. Now, at any moment, this is rapid play rules, for those of you who don't know. If you're trying to win, as Carlsen was here with rook and bishop against rook, you can offer a draw, or basically stop the clock and say, I claim a draw, because this is clearly a drawn position if white wants it. But Magnus just didn't give up. And at this moment, Nakamura played rook e7, and Magnus Carlsen lost on time. Now, if over the last few moves he just stopped the clock before he lost on time and said, I claim a draw, it would have been a draw. But he is so stubborn. Remember, they weren't playing with increment. They just went down to the wire. So Magnus ended up losing this position on time. Quite extraordinary. But that just shows his mentality. He never wants to give up playing for a win. But in this game, he crossed the line and very foolishly just kind of got caught up in the heat of the moment and declined to offer a draw. Extraordinary. So that meant that Hikaru catches, makes a bit of ground on Magnus anyway. So after these 8 games of long rapid chess, 3 draws, 3 wins for Magnus, 2 wins for Hikaru, and so they go into the quick, short rapid play games tomorrow. Now, it's only 1 point for a win with the quick rapid play games, the 10-minute games. The long rapid play counted for 2 points per win. So at the moment the score is, let me work it out, it is is it 9-7 for Magnus? He's got a 2-point lead anyway. That's what I do know. 2-point lead going into the 8-10 minute games. So don't miss it. We've had such up and downs, but really I think Magnus has been outplaying Nakamura over the past few games. Actually, he seems to be much more level-headed, but anything can happen tomorrow.